we would like to learn a little bit more about why you are attending and a bit more about you. So there are going to be 2 polls coming up. Here comes the first poll. So you have about 30 seconds to answer the poll, and then it'll come down and we'll put up the second one. So we're asking for this information because we would like to know who is underrepresented at our events and to allow us to improve our outreach and continue to address barriers in participation. We know there are many questions we could ask to understand people's identities, but these are the 3 main questions that we're asking of people tonight. Okay, so I think that's the first poll. And the second poll. And this poll here has 3, 4, 5 questions to it. So make sure you keep scrolling and answer the questions. Okay. We have just a few more people to answer the questions. We really do appreciate everybody taking the time to answer these questions. I see there was asexual was omitted from the list, so apologies for that. Okay. And others, yes, this was certainly not an exclusive list. Appreciate those reminders. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Joy.
Remember to unmute. Great, thank you, Rhiannon. So I'm Joy Masahara, and I'm a co-chair of Women Transforming Cities. And on behalf of Women Transforming Cities, I just want to welcome all of you. Thank you very much for being here. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Women Transforming Cities, we are a nonprofit organization founded by co-chair and former city councillor Ellen Woodsworth. Our mission is to transform cities into spaces that work for all people by empowering self-identified women and girls in all their diversity through community engagement, inclusive policies, equitable representation. And an important core value is intersectionality, and we strive to apply this lens to all of our work. So we'd like to acknowledge the support of the Department for Women and Gender Equality, WAGE, who funded the 3-year project we completed this year, which looked at women's participation in local government. And this was a project done in partnership with the Canadian Research Institute for the Advancement of Women, whom we also give thanks to and acknowledge today. So I'd also like to thank all of the panelists that are here today and the moderator, Rhiannon Bennett, and a big thank you to our staff person, Ash Peplaball, as well as the board of Women Transforming Cities. So we had planned a 1-day conference way back in March, and this was to be a conclusion to this project, and really, you know, an ending, but also a beginning, you know, to look at how we can continue to transform cities for women. So we decided to cancel back in March, just because everything shut down, just before everything shut down actually, as the pandemic was declared. So now we're here, and this is the second of a 3-part webinars related to the project. But of course, COVID has changed everything, and It's really shone a spotlight on all the inequities and vulnerabilities that already existed in our communities. Those that are connected to gender, race, age, class, ability, sexual orientation, or due to being Indigenous. So whether the stressor is a pandemic, climate catastrophe, or economic crisis, it amplifies the disproportionate effects on women, particularly diverse women and other vulnerable groups. So human rights, including women's rights, are being challenged. And this is in the context of still no country in the world achieving full gender equity according to UN Women. And the potential for huge setbacks in economic gains, sexual and reproductive health rights, etc., are very real right now. So this is a time for action. And we know everyone is fatigued and stressed, but we also see opportunity and momentum. And in some sense, there's renewed energy, with the continued demonstrations, the call outs from so many sources for real change, for a better world. So this is the context we're going into today's webinar. Women Transforming Cities wants to come out of this session with some collective, collaborative, and concrete steps for action and change. There is more urgency now. We want as many of you as possible to get involved in whatever way you can. Join WTC, join other groups that are working for change. For those who can't right now, maybe in the future. And we thank you for participating tonight. So let me tell you a little bit about the project before we get going. The project focused on women's participation in local government, and we wanted to explore the multiple ways in which women might have impact on making cities better places to live for all. We examined 4 categories of participation, focusing on Vancouver and Surrey. And we looked at women participating at the elected level, as city staff, particularly in leadership positions within the city, at the advisory group level, and in general civic participation. So our first webinar was a few weeks ago, and it looked at the elected level with a focus on diverse women. We had some great speakers providing some really valuable insights, and this webinar was recorded and is still available for viewing on the Women Transforming Cities Facebook page. Tonight, we will look at how diverse women can take action in their cities, whether that be an advisory committee or engaging in various public forums or speaking at or writing letters to council. We want to explore today how we can engage others, particularly those whose voices are least heard. And the final webinar, which will be on November 16th, will look at the electoral structure itself and how it can impede or enhance women's representation. So barriers to women's participation in terms of advisory bodies and in general civic engagement can be divided into individual, structural, and systemic barriers. And these categories are all interconnected and affect each other. But it allows a way of, for us to look at them, and also maybe a way of talking about or basically trying to tackle some of them as well. So individual barriers include things like financial resources, confidence and knowledge, particularly of civic processes, mentorship and sponsorship networks and supports, capacity to do what is mostly volunteer work when you're on advisory committees. Many of these supports are lacking for women and more so for diverse women. Structural factors include things like the policies and practices of individual municipalities, things like childcare for participants at council meetings, or whether you're on an advisory group, honorariums, or more the lack of them, and then the time and location of meetings, individual, including council meetings, etc. Systemic barriers include, of course, all the isms. And we found from our project that there were still women who weren't comfortable when the majority of the leadership that they were seeing was still white and still men. Ageism, homophobia, etc. These are all things that will be barriers. So, as I said, we did find these as barriers. Other interesting things we found were that having specific policies, such as in Vancouver, which requires gender and diversity quotas on their advisory committees, has actually improved the gender and diversity makeup of these groups. Use of technology to survey populations, such as the Talk Vancouver system, in Vancouver may increase input, but can also produce other types of barriers. For example, the majority of users, 80% of this survey system, were aged between 30 and 69. So we're missing youth and we're missing older people. And both Surrey and Vancouver have put effort into civic engagement, but input still tends to skew towards older, higher income English-speaking populations in both cities. And although women do seem to be represented proportionally, about 50%, in these engagement activities, still diverse women are not as well represented. So some of the recommendations coming out of the project in terms of advisory bodies, public engagement are, and this is just a few of them. One, collect disaggregated data. So we know who is and is not being represented, and consider alternative forms of engagement for those that are underrepresented. Two, establish women's advisory committees where there are none. Three, lower the structural barriers. In some communities are starting to provide childcare during council meetings or public forums. So this is a good step in that direction. Have some form of feedback to those participating in civic engagement, so the results of their efforts can be known, and then activities can be adjusted based on the impact. So these are just a few of the recommendations out of the project, and I'm really eager to hear more from our panelists this evening. So I'll pass it back to Rhiannon to start off the discussion.
Great, thank you very much. And we are just going to skip right on past the bios because you all have access to everybody's bios in the Eventbrite and online. Let's not take up too much time talking about ourselves, and let's get to these amazing conversations that we're going to have. So we're just going to dive right in. And I also just wanted to acknowledge that we are conducting our panel today in English, which is exclusionary of people who don't speak English. And I also want to recognize the colonial nature of English. It's a trade language, colonizes your mouth and your mind. And that's what we're stuck with for today. So we're just that's what we're doing. All right, so everyone just want to we can unmute and we can just get right in. There's also a Q&A feature. If you could put your questions in the Q&A and not in the chat. It's easier to manage questions through the Q&A feature than it is through the chat. We'll have some time at the end for questions from the audience, but sometimes people are able to answer questions as we go. So make sure that you recognize where that feature is. All right. So are we ready?
I was born ready.
Yes.
I was made for this.
Yes, let's do this.
Sorry.
Ooh, I think we're all a little tired and punchy. It's been a week, hey?
It's been an intense week. I think Kimberly's had the most intense week of all of us.
I think it's all been, I think we all have our own levels of intensity. I think that yeah, we are all, by nature of us being here, I know that the kind of people that we are and the work that we're doing. So yeah, I'm feeling a little bit tired and punchy too. So this should be a lot of fun. All right. Okay, so first question, how do you engage with your city and why? How do you engage with your city and why?
Priti, you go first.
Okay.
I'm gonna volunteer you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, why and how? So let me start with the why. I as a feminist settler living in Coquitlam, it's been a struggle. So I realized that we all know that every aspect of politics influences our life, right from transportation, childcare, and all the other stuff. And while living here, I was really very active in city of Vancouver, like in the community, but not really here where I live and work in Coquitlam. So I realized that maybe I need to get involved, and that's because it was so important. And of course, the optics of city of Coquitlam are actually very unsettling if you've seen a picture of the counselors. so, so that's how I thought it was important, got involved. And how is a very interesting, complex, and racially quite segregating in terms of when I started about 4 or 5 years ago, that I decided I wanted to get involved. Every time I made a call, I was told that I should go on the Multicultural Advisory Committee. There were no other options given. It made me so mad, but in a few years, I realized that I'd rather be in than be out. So I took the MAC opportunity, and I am currently on the Multicultural Advisory Committee of Coquitlam and the Women's Committee in Vancouver. And they are so different. It's like living on 2 different planets. And probably we'll be able to go more into the differences soon. But the how is also all about how do you gather opportunities to dismantle the system that keeps us away, because it's totally designed to keep you away. So that's where I am at. I'm not sure how much we should talk, so I'm going to stop now and let my colleagues, my partners talk.
So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 set questions, and then questions from the audience. And we're ahead of schedule here a little bit, so we have until 6:45 to answer these 5 questions. So don't feel that you need to rush your answers if you've got, or something comes to you, or you want to go back to a question if something comes to you after. Let's do that. We are in control of our time today. Okay, so question: how do you engage with your city and why? Who's fired up to answer next?
Hopping in. Sorry, Kimberly. How do I engage with my city and why? Okay, so I am engaged in my city because my job is, I'm a musician and an artist, and I produce events and shows. So I actually fell into being engaged in my city totally by accident, like organizing groups of musicians and creatives in Gastown to try and basically pay for the fact that we were operating out of $1 million venue in one of the poorest neighborhoods in the city. So that's how I first started getting involved and engaged in my city, was just basically opening my eyes, looking around me, and realizing that it's not fair. And unfortunately, fortunately, the best way that I could see to organize was to organize with the people, not with the powers that be. My decisions are changing now. I realize where power lies and who you have to talk to get things done. But still, in my soul of souls, believe that the real power lies with the people. Priti, I have to applaud you. Being on 2 committees is that's a big job. I don't know if I could do that yet, because I'm too mad. I'm too mad.
The best part is I take the fire and passion from one committee and move it to this very regressive committee.
Okay.
And learning so much from the other to transport to the other, but we'll get into that. Yeah, it's been interesting.
I love it.
Yeah, there are definitely some cities in the Lower Mainland that are quite a bit farther behind than work being done in Vancouver. That's for sure. I live on the Tsawwassen lands, but my neighboring city is Delta, and that's where I've been doing a lot of organizing. And it's I've always had to travel to go and do work, so it's been a whole new experience being able to do this work where I grew up. Kimberly, why, how and why are you engaged with your city?
Might I just say it's really refreshing to hear from 2 folks who I really look up to speak about these things and their trials and tribulations. So thank you for sharing, first and foremost. I think, like many of us here, I wear many different hats. And so becoming involved, I guess, in my city, in Vancouver, came because I was a musical theater nerd, first and foremost. and then started singing about climate change with other youth my age when I was 16. But so I'll give this as a disclaimer. While I think it's important to have folks who can speak in nuanced ways to equity and justice to participate in all levels of governmental involvement, I think it's also important to understand and bring light to the land that this work happens on. We're on unceded Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh land. Unceded means stolen, and the weight and gravity of that, particularly during and around election seasons, sometimes gets swept under the rug. So I like to hold myself accountable to remember that our work in electoral systems within cities, provinces, and colonially set boundaries is something that has oftentimes been used to oppress those most marginalized, including racialized people and communities, not excluding my own Cantonese diasporic community. And I'm lucky to be able to do this work, albeit difficult, and to participate in these governmental processes, but it's a lot. So I would also like us to remember that we also need to take care of ourselves and our community to do this work. So pick up a pillow, grab a glass of water, hug a pet, whatever brings you comfort throughout this all. I know we said we wouldn't read our bios and we wouldn't speak about them, but just because it's relevant to what I'm going to be speaking about later, I think. I sit as the co-chair of the Vancouver Just Recovery Coalition with Matthew Norris, a coalition that was formed to organize municipally around a just recovery in Vancouver, and so that the rebuilding and recovery from this pandemic doesn't fall into a space of austerity as the answer to our deficits. And our coalition guidelines emphasize that we want to ensure this work is not adding to the already growing toxic culture of overworking that this pandemic has added to, and instead to advocate for a municipal just recovery that is rooted in social, environmental, and economic justice. I also sit as the co-chair along with Michael Tan for the Chinatown Legacy Stewardship Group, and we're a City of Vancouver group that acts much like an advisory committee to steward initiatives that secure the legacy of Vancouver's Chinatown as a neighborhood that has significance for many diverse communities of color in Vancouver, and that works within municipal systems to speak on behalf of Chinatown, to work collaboratively on things like the Northeast Falls Creek Plan with the local host nations to ensure people of color aren't pitted against each other for the city's benefit like they have historically. I'm also the Race and Equity Programming Manager for Hua Foundation, a nonprofit based out of Chinatown, working within the Asian diaspora in Vancouver. I also sit on the organizing committee of One City Vancouver, a municipal party. Our elected officials are school trustee Jennifer Reddy, who's really rad, and Councillor Christine Boyle, who's also incredible, a really incredible white woman who I would not call anything less than an incredible ally. And I just finished working on the campaign to elect Tess Katrong as the Vancouver Langara MLA. So excuse me if I am raspy voiced and spouting madness because I'm super tired. Yeah, thanks for sharing space with me today.
You're so welcome. That is an incredible ways to connect and drive change within your city. I'm grateful for all the work that all of you are doing, and it's a lot of work. So I appreciate your reminders for self-care. I've got my water here too. I've had 2 naps today. I've been very fortunate that I've been able to have 2 naps today. So it is important that we take care of ourselves, because we can't pour from empty cups. So thank you for that reminder. Our next question is, when you first started getting involved in city issues, what surprised you or what did you learn?
Okay, I'll go. Seeing as you're both being shy, my darlings. Okay, sorry, what was the question? When I first started getting involved in city...
With city issues, what surprised you or what did you learn?
Oh, Lord. Okay, so the thing that surprised me the most was how little gets done in city council meetings. I am amazed at how much time is wasted by, I don't know whether it's specifically our council that seems to have problems like navigating issues effectively, but I really was surprised at how long it takes to get anything done because of the cumbersome language that has to be used, the Robert's Rules of Order, all that kind of stuff. And I was extremely surprised by the fact that being on city council is considered a part-time job in Vancouver. That's not a part-time job. The hours and hours and hours that I've spent as just a concerned citizen listening to city council, like that's a job in and of itself. So I can't imagine how we assume that job is a part-time job. And I wouldn't want to have a part-time counselor. I want to have somebody that's working full-time for my interests. I think that's wild. So yeah, that was the biggest thing that surprised me about getting involved, was how little actually gets done in those long meetings. And yeah, how long those meetings really are.
Yeah, it's interesting, like the point you bring up about the full-time job and the part-time job, but that's also been like my experience of shutting people out. So if you're not being compensated for your labor and you still have to maintain employment elsewhere, those positions are shut out for so many people. So I always think it's funny whenever like when councils or trustees get raises and the outrage. And I'm like, well, we need to pay people and we need to make sure that those are accessible to everybody, right? Okay, so what other surprises did people notice, or what did you learn as you were getting involved with city issues?
I'll build on where Tonye left, in the sense I'm in the committee and there are so many surprises. So I think I'll list a few critical ones. Definitely lack of childcare.
Mm-hmm.
Very gated procedures and processes. So even if you're a very confident person, which I claim to be, I think, you're still struggling to figure out what's going on. There are so many invisible ways of communication. There's so many networks that are already so tight, specifically around diversity and anti-racism stuff and voices of diverse self-identified women. There is really not much opportunity unless you really get to know the system. So when you're new, the orientation just happens in like a few seconds on the table and they're talking about who the chairperson is. The most often it's the white woman who takes on the chair position, and most often there are very few of us who go, no, wait. Like, how did all that just happen in 5 minutes? So really pulling back from that and really kind of, so just using your voice all the time. And I think one of the friends taught me this, that the mantra is push and breathe, push and breathe. So that's what I do. I'm like pushing, and then I'm like, so like I need time to breathe. So really a lot of the procedures should be in an orientation deeply covered. I find information is shared in a very limited way. I also find that the protocol, like you said, takes a long time. So sometimes you don't get into issue. And then you have so many presentations from parks and developers and different folks who are doing all this work. And they come and just present, they get your feedback, but then there's no coming back with what did they do with it. So the accountability piece is a big mess that you have to figure out on yourself. And again, like you said initially, Rhiannon, that the two committees where you are located also makes a very big difference. Also finding out who really are the decision makers. It's a very small group of white men still making decisions. And in Coquitlam, a lot of the developers are involved very directly. So really figuring out, like, how do you voice something? How do you bring it up? And I will go later, I'll talk about the disaggregated data that I'm pushing for in Coquitlam. But it is a real maze. So communication is an issue, and finding your allies from the counselors is another job. Like, all counselors are definitely not your allies. So, so really figuring out who's going to be supporting your voice and your same values about equity and diversity is really important.
So true.
Thank
And Kimberly?
Yeah. I can get lost in like listening to you folks very easily. I started engaging in these spaces at the ripe age of 16. I don't think I had any context of or understanding of how power or race or gender or sexuality or ability would play into how I was treated or how I was seen or the power I had access to. So I was surprised by everything. But there was this voice inside my head that told me that if I didn't pretend I wasn't a part of this world, that I did have parents who worked in politics or who were professors or a family and a community who supports me in the way that I saw other white families supporting their kids, which I didn't. They actually told me things like, what difference can you make? And be careful, they don't like people like us, which was discouraging, but here we are now. I've learned so much about my own power and how to wield it with strength and softness and to see things like my femininity and my culture and queerness as such a blessing and never a curse. That being said, I've been a part of 8+ campaigns over nearly 10 years, and just within the last year I was able to be a part of the leadership team, the one that decides how a candidate's communications read, how a candidate spends their time, how we best reach out to voters, what resources we can put into things like accessibility audits and inclusion mandates. And what surprised me the most was how much better people of color have to be in these spaces. Women of color are rarely given the space and time needed to process all that has been aggressed onto them. We're told to be hard workers, that we have to be better than our white colleagues, to find success, to be good daughters, to our families, to expect zero praise in this all, and to keep our heads down and work. And this is a toxic, unrealistic double standard of extra proportions, and often it's enforced by people like us through generations of toxicity and spiraling. So I think unpacking culture and intergenerational trauma and politics and betrayal and more, it sounds like a good soap opera, but overall, I think it's just exhausting. So yeah, that's what surprised me.
So maybe we'll come back together and we'll make a colonial soap opera. We should start, right?
I don't
I'm
know.
here for that 100%.
It's true. Like I think about what's going on in Delta around organizing around anti-racism, and I can see it already how mediocre white men will be praised and rewarded for learning about racism, right? So they'll get to keep their seats and keep shutting out people with lived experience and who are far more knowledgeable and experts on things. But we're held to different standards, and I'm hearing that very much from all of you tonight as well, is that how much extra work it is to navigate all these systems and how we need to behave. We can't be unpalatable, right?
The amount of people that I've seen get shouted at city council for showing their emotion is just people of color. It's always people of color.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, okay, stop it.
Yes, stop it. Stop it. We should come with signs to council meetings that just say stop it. Okay. Great. Next question. Whose voice do you notice is missing in city processes, and what do we need to change to bring those folks to the table? Kimberly, did you want to go first this time?
Yeah, happily. I mean, like hashtag in Vancouver specifically, hashtag cancel so white is certainly a still relevant critique. That being said, more is not enough. Electing more women of color to office is not enough. Sending women of color into toxic spaces that were made to question their legitimacy, their experiences, their intelligence, that have played a role in the colonization of their cultures and land is not enough. We need structures to support these women in all that they do, so that we don't expect these women to take on childcare, changing political systems to be less racist and sexist, casually take microaggressions and macroaggressions hit after hit, while also being expected to tell beautiful stories of their change, making to inspire white folks and other whose idealism creates actually more work for these women of color. yeah, I'll leave it at that.
I feel like you've just described my current situation here. As I've got the Muppet Show on the TV and the 4-year-old running around, like, yeah, while I'm working to dismantle all of these systems and do the work. And then I stopped apologizing for her presence. I don't know if I've ever done that, and I have never ever asked permission to bring her anywhere. She comes with. I don't ask. She's come with me to lots of meetings, lots of spaces where children aren't normally present, and I just bring her, and that's just what it is.
You want more people like me? Take me as I am.
That's right. That's right. All right. Yes, Priti?
I think that's a great way to revolt and just take all our kids everywhere, grandkids, nieces, nephews. A lot of
Really?
noise. Yeah. I think for me, of course, it's missing many voices, but for me, the dominant voice that is missing on this land is Indigenous voice. We have absolutely no participation in Coquitlam from Indigenous folks, and I think there are no efforts made either. So it's not like you don't know, and there is like such a conscious denial and intention. But besides that, refugees, we have a lot of refugees now living in this neighborhood. Of course, people of color, Black folks, youth, you rarely see like a very small number. And again, mostly in MAC, which is the Multicultural Committee. We have an amazing counselor, Trish, who's our first Black woman. Yeah, that happened. And so I think change will come, but we need this really, like we need a group like WTC to really empower and push and collect and bring young and youth and all voices together. I find that not just the voices are missing, but also processes are missing where one can actually recommend something, but there is no place. So Coquitlam does not pass any motions. You can't pass motions in Coquitlam. Like you have to do a recommendation through other businesses, and it's like a long procedure that I'm now going through. But maybe we can talk that with the barriers, because I know you have a question later. And I think you also asked what needs to change to bring these folks on the table. And I think the very first thing would be having really clear, simple, user-friendly language information sessions in public spaces where it's accessible, open to all. It's kind of an underlying invisible thing that happens where it feels like this is such an institution where it only belongs to these counselors and it's not open to public, but it should be a public space. There should be more collaboration between regular working NGOs who work with various people in these communities, rather than all the information going to places like Chamber of Commerce, where, you know, things happen and those networks really keep the systems going. I think also talking about the reality of getting involved. Like it is exhausting work, but I think the inspiration comes from other members and learning from other folks that are involved from the community. But it's exhausting work, there's no money. If you take up an issue on your own time, you have to do the research, you have to find the allies, and then you have to push the agenda. So everything is on your shoulders, in the sense as if we don't have enough. So, but that's the only way, that's the only way this works at this moment. Hopefully it'll change.
Thanks. And last but not least.
Okay. You both summed up pretty much perfectly what I was going to say, but just to harp on it again, of course, there is, in our city council in Vancouver, there is no Indigenous leadership on it as far as I know. There's no, I mean, I shouldn't say there's no Black people, but we need more people of color, and we need people from different financial backgrounds, because right now we are being led by people that have no idea what it is to struggle on a day-to-day basis anymore. They might have in the past, but once you become a city councilor, you're making like 90 G's a year. If you become a city manager, you're making $350,000 a year. If you get into that system, there's no way you can remember. I don't care what anybody tells me. These people don't remember. If they did, they would not make the decisions they make. So for me, more people of color, more people that are from a more modest background, and more people that don't have a vested interest in certain things. Like if you are a business person or you have investment in certain things, you're going to move a certain way. If you are invested in McDonald's, you're going to make sure the McDonald's succeeds. If you're invested in oil and gas, you're going to make sure the oil and gas succeeds. Also, the other thing is that I don't think that we are hard enough on people who, not hard enough, but like we don't ask for enough information for people, from people that are running for leadership positions, in terms of who they are indebted to. We're seeing it in the United States right now. That guy owes $400 million to people that nobody knows who that is. We really need to start wondering about where the loyalties of our leaders lie, and whether they have a vested interest in certain financial things coming to pass. If we start doing that, I think we'd be really horrified to know that certain things about certain people. But getting people that have a connection to what it is to actually, I don't know, be poor, struggle, is like key for me. I'm not saying fill city council with homeless people. Although, shit, we might do better than we're doing right now. Who knows? But I'm just saying, like, we need more, not just diverse in skin tone, diverse in background, diverse in education level, diverse in experience, in you know, identity. We need it all. We need it all. Less white people, mainly.
Less white people, that, yes. Yeah, that's true. I think that the who people's loyalty for, that's a good question. I'm trying to think of all candidates and things that I've been to, and all of the Q&As I've seen. I've never seen any questions about that, so that's interesting. I think that maybe we'll plant some seeds about what we can do, add some questions about that. I know when I've managed to get myself into rooms, some of the casual conversations about vacationing and boats and things, I'm just like, yeah, these aren't my people. I can't contribute to this conversation about all-inclusive vacations. Okay, let's see. Next question. Is there work you'd like to do that you haven't gotten to yet? What barriers need to be removed? What's on your to-do list?
If I can just jump in here and also comment on something that was spoken about by Tonye in the last question. I like really struggle with the question about how to involve more like Indigenous and Black people in these spaces, and people of color, people of marginalized identities in general, because like politics has never served them. Politics has never been for them, and it's never served them in ways that like we ask for their involvement, and then for what? So I struggle with that, and I don't have an answer to that, but I just wanted to like bring that up and ponder it with each other. As to answering Rhiannon, your question about work that we haven't gotten to do yet, and barriers, I think I'd love to learn more about data, about how to manage marks, and about how to strategize around voter contact, and about how Get Out the Vote is done in campaigns of all different kinds of scales. But access to these insider hard skills often require you to buy in, sometimes literally, like capitalism dictates who has the monetary stability to volunteer and raise in the ranks of party politics and other systems. to the systems that see people as numbers on a spreadsheet, potential voters who will or won't support you based on binary categories of social hierarchies. So the barriers that need to be removed are the ones that see people as of marginalized identities as the other, as apart from the norm that centers whiteness and straightness, and masculinity is the center that we depart from. Can I pass it on to Tonye?
With the mic drop. Pow! Kimberly, speak to me daily into my ear, please. What is the work that I would love to do that I haven't done yet? One thing, playing off yours, Kimberly, is how I would love to learn about data visualization and how to take complex data and make it interesting for the regular person to look at. One of the things that inspired me so much and is inspiring the work that I'm doing right now is, obviously, global rebellion has been raging all summer, in case you haven't been watching the news. And something so simple. Somebody made an infographic of a pie chart, or what's it called? Yeah, pie chart of the City of Vancouver budget. And they very simply put the budget, and then they put in there the section that is for the cops, which is a lot of money. Up until that moment, the reality of how much money was being spent on potentially killing me didn't enter into my brain in a real way. But as soon as I saw that little slice of pie, not little slice of pie, huge slice of pie, something like 345 million or something like that, I was like, oh, damn, this is the thing that's missing. People don't want to pour through data. People don't want to pour through budgets. Forget about budgets. The VPD won't even give you a budget, but people don't want to pour through budgets. What they need is like short, sweet, bite-sized, flashy, like quick data visualization, drawing change. They do incredible work. And graphic recording, for anybody who hasn't used it yet in your conference or webinar, please do so. So yeah, data visualization. And then the other thing that I really want to learn about, which I haven't yet, is how I want to get more confident in writing, because I am a songwriter, but I'm not an essay writer. I'm not. And I want to be the kind of person that has command of the English language in a way. I can move people with music, but I want to move people through the written word. So that's the thing that I want to do.
You both have said it so well. I'll just add some concrete pieces from my work experience. So for me, I think the biggest barrier is, how do I change or shift what goes on in Coquitlam to really include Indigenous voices? That's really, really important work. And I've tried, need more support, ideas. How can we make that shift? The other concrete example I can give is, until we know the disaggregated data, at least here in Coquitlam, we don't know what the real situation is. They're all like people's individual experiences and generalizations and stereotypes when they're making decisions. So in fact, through Ellen, I was able to access the grandmother's perspective, the new report that has come out of BC Human Rights Commission's office, which is really well done. It's called Grandmother's Perspective, and took it to the advisory committee here, Coquitlam again, and after a few meetings was able to table it, and now we are in a subgroup working on a proposal to take back to the council. Because as I said, we cannot really do motions here. That capacity and ability is not in the system. I don't know how that happened, but I'm learning to find out. And I was really shocked how different it is. Like, you can't just show up. If you want presentation, it's like a whole protocol. So it's very kind of regressive way of working, I find. It's not like open and transparent and welcoming at all. So we are trying to table that report soon, hopefully in the next month or so. And also I would love to have the 50% gender equality as a starting point. And I know that's another long battle, which is we would have to have GBA as well as a gender equality strategy and a plan. And our voices for support of gender and diversity within the committees is very, very minute and small. It's powerful, but small. So we really need to expand. So those are like very critical concerns that I'm working on right now and would like to work further on it.
So great. Data is so important. I have a complex relationship with data, having had, you know, my family and my peers and my, you know, Indigenous people there's so much data collected on us, so much data, and it's frequently weaponized against us and taken out of context. So it's been really interesting for me this last few months as I've really watched advocates really push for more data and trying to understand sort of a bigger picture about data collection and about who gets to control the data is, you know, really the most important piece to it, right? Who gets the narrative of that data is really important, because when I present data on Indigenous graduation rates is very different than when someone who's non-Indigenous might present data on Indigenous graduation rates. Whereas I frame it as a failure of the system and the reflection on the gaps in the system and the poor supports. Other people may frame it as just Indigenous students not performing well, and that's not the case at all. The Indigenous students are not the problem. So it's important to, and I liked your comment about the pie chart and for the budgets and things, right? Like, because the budgets are so complex, and making sure to have the high level view of some of those things, but also recognizing that it's the teeny tiny little cuts and the teeny tiny little things that we also have to find a way of getting information on as well. I know, yeah, okay. Well, I'll get fired up about data, right? Who knew that this panel was going to turn into a conversation about data and stats, right? Surprise, that's what we want to talk about. Okay, so the next question. You also talked about your to-do list and what you're working on, but maybe we'll cover a little bit more about what barriers need to be removed. Let's not lose that question. So what are some of the barriers that need to be removed to some of those things on your to-do list?
All right, I'm gonna jump in. For me, the biggest barrier that is standing in the way of me like really pushing forward with the things that I want to learn and grow in, the areas I want to learn and grow in, is the fact that, one, I don't believe in my own skills and abilities. Two, I, at this moment, am not in a place where I can afford to go back to school. Three, I fully believe that in this moment, there are too many things that I would have to sacrifice in this moment to pursue that. I pursue it on my own time in an unofficial capacity, which is why it's taken me so long to develop these skills. But in terms of like, can I just pick up and decide to get a student loan and go back to school no, I can't do that. I have a husband, I have a child, I have, also we're living a pandemic. I don't have a job until the end of 2022. Like, there are so many different aspects of my life that are not standing in the way, but make it not so simple for me to make the decision to, for example, somebody hit me up and said, hey, if there was a snap election called today municipally, would you be able to run? And I had to think about it, because like, that's my future dream. I would love to run municipally. 2022, I'm coming for that ass. Just joking. I'm kidding. But there are so many things that stand in the way of me doing that at this moment. And I felt so bad for everybody who had to make that decision within 24 hours to participate in this snap election that we had. Like, what? Not everybody. Thanks, Justine. I love you. I know we talked about this already. But yeah, it's a huge decision for anyone to decide to drop their life and go back to school, or to drop their life and run for election, or to, drop their life and do anything. But that's where I'm at right now. But I see this time, the pandemic has been absolutely an incredible time for me, because I decided to use it as an opportunity to learn about these processes. I might not be able to afford to go back to school, but I can definitely afford to spend 10 hours listening to city council and understanding what these people are doing. That's the education I can afford right now. And it's, it's worth it. And it sucks, because the situation that I'm in, I know that many, many people are in. I know that many people who cannot even vote are as passionate as I am, and they are putting in the time and effort and energy to learn about the system, even though they can't participate in it. That's wild. People who deserve to be in these positions cannot participate because they're like, how am I going to feed my kids? That's whack. Okay, this is whack. This is not how we're supposed to be living. And I'm gonna just be here learning what I learn, practicing my writing skills, so that I could take the system down when my time comes, 2022 or beyond. We'll see.
2022. You said it out loud now twice, maybe 3 times. So
Right.
I'm going to say it out loud too. So 2022, it's happening. We will see your name on a ballot, and you already have your campaign team developing here in the chat section. There's already voters and supports there, so you're getting there. So, but those are all like really valid points. Like when it's how much. Like you're right. Like we can't just decide in a snap to do this. And I was watching the nominations come through as we were getting, even after the writ drop, and like the nominations just kept getting whiter and whiter, and more men and more men. And there was an Indigenous candidate that came in fairly last minute, but it's so much more work to support Indigenous candidates and non-white men candidates. So it is hard. So we've got 2 years out. We all need to start looking at who we're getting behind here. Okay, so you got us all fired up now. So barriers. Who'd like to talk about some more barriers that we need to tear down in the next 6 months?
So I'll jump in. I wanted to add to this, Tonye. We actually need more lived experience, not academic education on the councils. I think we have a lot of that. We really live. Policies should be coming from lived experiences. That's the only way we're going to see a shift. So I'm also involved in voting for you, and just go. Yes.
I love you. I love you.
You'll be awesome. Absolutely. So I think the barriers, I've said a few already, but there is this very unsaid message about, again, I'm really focusing today on Coquitlam because you are bringing the voice of Vancouver, which is quite much more progressive than where we are at. That there's unsaid things that like really manifest in the way the committees work, but also the access to BIPOC folks, like that is so limiting, and the understanding about engagement, about race, all of that is so limiting that the work you're doing is you're working on figuring out and how to share knowledge with the counselors who don't know any of this, and yet you have to really push the agenda you believe in. So it's really complex. I find the barriers are really, a lot would change if I think all counselors, including staff, went for some anti-racism training. like a deeper training. And I think that would really help with really listening and not just taking advice for certain projects, but really listening into how can we shift and change and look at the gaps that exist in the community. I'll jump in when I think of others. I'll let Kimberly go.
I have nothing to add to that.
All right.
One other thing I think is really important. There is no communication between councils or between committees. So you may have 5 committees. Let's say I think there are 18 committees in Vancouver, I think, and about 6 in Coquitlam, but there's no communication between committees. So nobody knows what's happening. And there is no communication between various councils, except at the councillor level, but not for folks like us who are involved and wanting to do good for our community. So you kind of are only attached with your own little committee and you don't know. So if we were concerned right now about having a recovery, they're talking about economic recovery plan, we all know that, but we want that plan to look completely different. There is no alliance with the committee who's working on that. Like there is no information shared, there's no alliance, there's no partnership. So I find that is another big barrier, like that kind of sharing and building bridges is not happening.
It's true. It's true. And I mean, these are all really big systems to try and sort out and navigate how the pieces fit and how they don't fit together. Is just as important to figure out, and asking why can't we talk to that committee, and why can't we do that is, and that takes a lot of courage. And Kimberly just put a note in here that November is budget time in City Hall. And that's critical that people are engaged in that process. And really, this is where you can really drive a lot of change too, is to try and make your voice heard through the budget process. And the school board budget is in March, April. So it's the municipal budgets have a different sort of timeline. Okay, so we've got some time here. We're not rushed for time. You guys are all very succinct and passionate and powerful with your words. I love it. Okay, so the last set question that we have here is, what are you working on right now? And what's one more thing that we can all do tomorrow to support your work?
Perhaps I can start with this. So one thing before I answer that question, just adding on to the more is not enough. We need progressive women of color who will not see other women of color as their competition, who won't steamroll their way across other women of color to have a seat at the table, because like we said, the table we're asking to have a seat at already isn't made for us. It's made to keep us in menial labor in domestic spaces and inferior spaces where we're the minute takers and not the ones speaking. And we need women of color who are also willing to take a step back and make room for those who are more marginalized themselves, ones who will carry the torch further than those before even could have. And I think it's easy to look at women who have done this, like Nadine Akagawa, Jenny Kwan, two of my Asian political heroes. But I must tell you that I think that all these women and femmes could not have done this without the supports and spaces that understood and supported them throughout their journey. I think there are also many spaces where I would trust the only man of color in a room of white women first, and this is not to breed mistrust, but merely to point out the often toxic positivity of women supporting women that often is built for the benefit of white women in these spaces, to use women of color as the political equivalent to their like gay best friend to prove they aren't homophobic, or their like black friend to prove they aren't racist, which is never actual proof of their ability to understand anti-homophobia or anti-racism. So far as what I'm working on right now, I'm indulging in cheese and cat time. I'm resting, I'm healing, I'm going on a COVID-safe vacation, I'm talking on the phone with my elders. so far as what you can do. You can support healing spaces and spaces of joy for folks like us on this panel and advocate for more of them in general. And you can advocate for access to cultural spaces. You can mentor women of color and folks of color without asking for anything in return, but their brilliance and with the understanding that they will do work that is needed in this world. Priti, can I hand it off to you?
What can I say after that? That's like, yeah, very strong, beautifully said. I think maybe what I would love is I saw that WTC recently is has made a watch council group. I would love to replicate that in Coquitlam. So yes, I think that's a great idea, and I would love something like that here. I would love a women's equity strategy embedded here, or gender equality plan in Coquitlam. Before all my hair go gray, I hope it happens. But yeah, and that's one way we can really recognize the potential, but also include the diverse residents and women from this community to be part of it, specifically BIPOC. And one other issue that I thought is, a lot of times they tend to get heterosexual men of color on committees. And I really feel that they should do a feminist test before they are allowed to come in, because it really doesn't help. It doesn't help having people of color, specifically men, heterosexual. It doesn't help if they're patriarchal. Nothing changes, it gets worse. So that was probably where I need support, is more women, more feminist women, self-identified women, and diverse women in our communities, and Indigenous elders and folks. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's important, like that, the feminist test, because I think like representation is important, but it's the right kind of representation. I mean, we saw just recently in this last election how white women can uphold the patriarchy and be so harmful to other women. So we know that it happens every day. I mean, so I think we need to set our standards higher than just being satisfied with representation, because that's a lot of times that's just like settling for, well, I guess I'll be happy that person got there, but are they actually going to do anything to help our community and to address any of these changes, or are they just going to maintain the status quo? So I mean, we see people of all walks of life in all sorts of parties. We see Black people for Trump. We see women for Trump. Like not that I don't want to talk about him anymore, but
traitors, everyone.
But just to highlight, and that happens here too, right? So it's just that just because you're a member of a marginalized, oppressed, equity-seeking group, whatever you want to label us as, doesn't mean that getting you to the table is going to help all of us. I can't remember who it was next. Yes,
It's me,
go
but I
for
forgot
it.
the question. Can you tell me?
Okay, I have it written
Ask me again.
down so I can read it.
Give it to me. I
Okay.
also have it somewhere, but I can't.
That's fine. That's why I'm here.
Thanks, Rhiannon. You're the best.
You're welcome. What are you working on right now? And what's one thing we can all do tomorrow to support your work?
Okay, boom. Here we go. So right now I'm working on, I'm part of a very fantastic research cluster called the Defund Network. And this network is a group of budding abolitionists based in Vancouver who are all doing the good work of meeting regularly and developing processes and strategies to try and defund the Vancouver Police Department. So if you're interested in supporting me in any way, shape, or form, the biggest thing that you can do for me is learn about abolition and also develop your imagination, because one of the things that I'm running into constantly from people that are against the idea of defunding the police or abolishing the police is that they have no concept or ability to imagine a life outside of policing. So if you want to do something to help me as a human being, it would be to develop your imagination, because the thing that's going to hold us back, as far as I can see, is our own inability to let go of certain things. We need to let go of the idea of policing people, and yeah, you can only do that if you start imagining what might come next. Unlearn. Yeah, Shanta. I'm dropping in the chat a link to defund.ca. The Defund Network in Vancouver doesn't have a website, obviously, because the cops would be all over it. Stupid. But if you are interested in learning more about this work, I'm dropping my email in the chat. Please feel free to reach out to me anytime. I am on the Community Values and Agreements Committee. I am the welcoming person that will welcome you into the network. You can come to a meeting. I would be glad to host you and to enjoy this work with you. What else am I working on? I'm working on, that's about it, defunding the police. My whole life is pretty much just that right
No big deal.
now.
Just a small project.
No big deal.
But I like that, and I've been working on my own deepening understanding of that movement, and doing some deep listening, right? Like, and recognizing that when you're new to a movement, that there are people who have been doing that work for a long time, and that their lived experience and their work is valuable, and we need to just listen and come along. Like, it was like, even my own understanding of sex work as work, that was a journey. So I remember being like, okay, sex work is work. I don't understand that, but I respect these people that are saying it, and it sort of makes sense. And then I listened to sex workers, and I listened to sex workers' lived experiences, and then things started to click.
Game
So
changer.
it's a game changer, right? So it's that listening is so important to people who have been doing this work for so long. And policing culture, that's something that I'm really starting to put those pieces together on, right? About how much it's not just about cops, it's about the policing culture that we live in, and the policing of women's bodies, and the policing of bodies in general. Like, you're too fat, you're too thin, you shouldn't wear that, and why did you make that face, and why do you smell like that? And right, like, there's so many ways that we police each other instead of being loving and caring and accepting. And I don't want to live in a tolerant world. I want to live in an accepting and compassionate world. But that comes from some really deep listening. So we're pretty much on time we're doing all right. So we can dive into some of these questions here in the Q&A. So Justine is in here with the hard-hitting questions right away. I love it. So we'll start with, how can we advocate for land back initiatives from our cities?
Okay. The best way that I know how to advocate for land back initiatives in our cities is to talk with Indigenous people from your cities and from your communities and find out what it is that they're working on. Somebody just gifted me an incredible document that was made by I think it was made by the Squamish Nation, that's about projects that are going on the land and why they don't want them to happen. So one of the biggest ways that I'm recognizing that I can advocate is by going to the specific people and reading their data, reading their reports, reading their research, because the research that we're being given by the government and others serves a very particular narrative. So that's one way that I am changing the way that I try and advocate, by like actually incorporating information from directly from the source rather than from CBC or whatever.
Yeah, thanks. Anybody else want to talk about land back?
One of my dear friends, Salem, who is an elected council for the Squamish Nation, has done like enormous and incredible work with the lands under the Burrard Bridge, and as he like often jokes about like himself becoming a developer now, which is just funny because it's unceded land, and he's literally elected council for the Squamish Nation, of which is one of the 3 host nations of where we live now. But I also think about like calling out and in our own community members. Like I work in Chinatown with a lot of like Chinese patriarchs, and educating them about what land back is, about what unceded means, about how to be, you know, more in line with like advocating for the taking away of what white supremacy has done to all of us, because we are all symptoms of the things that white supremacy has befallen on us, has been one way, I think. So educating my own community and talking with my own elders about that, which is hard.
Yes, thank you. Priti?
I'd build on what they both said. I would love to have some material from these best practices that you named, like things that are happening that I can use here locally, and really approach the Coquitlam indigenous centers or places and kind of start this work. So I think it'd be great to have some learnings from other places where there has been successes. I personally don't have experience, but I would love to learn and use it locally. So I think there is also this gap, right? Like where can we document or bring these things or strategies that actually work that we can use in our own municipalities.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, just as an Indigenous person, I think the thing for people to remember most about like land back is to not think about it with your colonial mind and your colonized mind. Is like what land back means to us doesn't necessarily mean what land back means to other folks when they hear it. And I think that's an important distinction. Is I think that a lot of white folks and a lot of colonizers and new people are afraid of us and are afraid of what land back means to them, because our Chief Jan George has a good quote. What we fear, what we don't know, we fear, and what we fear, we destroy. I believe that was from Chief Jan George. I could totally get that wrong. Was it I just saw an active Jedi committee. I'm like, was that a Jedi quote? Because that would totally be up my alley too. But no, I'm pretty sure that's a chief from Chief Jan George, like Chief Jan George, who's very much like a Jedi. Okay, so thank you very much for that one. The next one is also sort of it's another powerhouse question. Okay, how do we balance not taking on too much as BIPOC, whether it be within the halls of power and outside in the streets? Colonial institutions can be so violent to BIPOC regardless of how progressive they may seem. So how do you think that we could preserve our energy while at the same time represent?
I don't think that onus should be on us. First and foremost, it's kind of like asking somebody like, why are you hurting after you've been like hit? You know, it's like, why? What can you do to not get hit? And it's like, why are you putting the onus on the person who was hit? So that's like my quick answer to that. I don't have any other answers really, because I already take on too much, I think, because I feel like the guilt of not doing enough with the privilege that I hold.
Yeah, same. I am never, oh my gosh. Oh. So cute. What a nice little wave. You're very
Say
cute.
hi.
Hi, what's your name?
You can't use the Sharpie. What's your name? Melona.
Melona. Cute. Hi, Melona. I
Hi.
forget the question now. I'm all baby eyes.
How do you, and we're running out of time here too.
Oh, yeah,
We
yeah.
were doing
Okay.
really good. So it was just basically, how do you balance the doing it all?
I haven't figured it out yet. I burn out constantly. Every 3 weeks, I go into a deep depression, and then I come out. I shut off my Instagram, Facebook, Twitter for a month or 2 or 3 at a time, and then I emerge. I do whatever I have to do in order to stay alive and functioning, first and
Yeah.
foremost. That's it. I haven't figured it out yet.
And there's, I feel you.
I think I'm going to just say that I feel the same. I feel guilt, but I also I am privileged. I'm in a privileged location right now and position. I'm going to use it at every opportunity. So that's where I am at. And then the self-care is totally, I resonate with all of you. Like, I just go to all these beautiful Coquitlam rivers and just feel it. Yeah.
So there's a couple of good questions in the Q&A if you maybe wanted just to go and type in some responses while we do our last survey question.
While we're reading, I'd just like to say that my mom texted me in the middle of this and said, I heart Tonye, because she's a really huge fan of your music.
Please tell your mom I said I love you so much. The feeling is entirely mutual. Holla at me anytime. If you need songs over the phone, I'm here for that. I got you anytime.
She's watching. She hears you.
Hi, Mom. I love you. You're a wonderful person. Let's hang when the plague is done.
Just about half the folks have answered the poll question here in progress. I'm just going to drop a link into the chat here for another panel that's coming up that's being organized through Feminist Delivered. We have a powerhouse panel coming up with Angela Davis, Dr. Pam Palmatter, and the other amazing panelists are escaping my mind at the moment, but is talking about Erica Phil, oh, thanks Justine, and Harsha Walia, thank you. And we're moving towards liberation, evolving beyond 21st century capitalism. And we got the questions going, the poll going, and the post Zoom chat is in the link to the post Zoom is in the chat. Oh, I think I'm running out of steam here. And I've got one more announcement. Okay, so the poll check, not sharing the results. Okay.
Share the results.
Share the results? No, we're not sharing those results. Okay, so closing. We're doing all right here. Okay. So I want to remind everybody about some upcoming events. So there's another panel coming up for WTC. I believe that the link for that is in the chat as well, our next webinar, and that is on electoral reform. So please make sure to share on social media, follow, sharing is caring. WTC is on Facebook and Instagram, and there is a hashtag diversifying cities, I believe was our hashtag, and I think we did it. And yes, on electoral reform, that's the next Women Transforming City panel is coming up on that. So there's lots of links. Make sure you copy and paste all those links quick before you leave. And yeah, I think we did it. We did it.
We did it. That's a beautiful thing. Thank you so much. Priti, Kimberly, Rhiannon, Melona, you're cute, all of you.
Yeah.
I love you
Thank you,
very
thank
much.
you, thank you so much.
Oh, sweet stickers.
Star Wars!
Star Wars.
Star Wars!
Star Wars. Because
You-
Star Wars is a series of 9 films that prove that men are too emotional to lead and that women should be the one in charge.
No. 100% true.
Right?
Can't handle your emotions.
They're
Going to
too,
the dark side.
they're too hysterical. Too hysterical.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you so much, y'all. I love you very much. Kimberly, I'm going to holla at you real soon.
It is Star Wars.
What are you
Oh,
back?
wow, Star Wars.
I enjoy your vacation, though. Ouch.
Yeah, Rhiannon, so beautiful to work with you and the way you brought us all together. Thank you, Kimberly.
Yes,
Tonye.
thanks, everybody.
Thank you so
this was a lot of
much.
fun. This is a lot of fun. Thanks,
Oh, hang
everybody.
on. I'm not leaving yet. I'm sticking around to steal all these links in the chat. Hang on.
Yeah,
Let me
grab
get
those
these
links.
links. Let me grab these links real quick.
I think
What
we
we
need
got
this.
here? What we got here? Oh, I just want to point out that I have been keeping an eye on the vacancies for committees at City Hall for about a year and a half, and nothing has come up. And 2 current vacancies have just come up. So anybody who is on the call who is interested, and it's funny because one of them is made for me. The Public Art Committee is looking for 2 art professional vacancies, and the Vancouver Public Library Board of Trustees, I think somebody dropped it in the chat earlier, they're looking for 6 people. The application is due November 1st at 11:59 p.m. Go through the
You got
chat. The
time,
link is in
good.
there. You got time. I'm gonna apply.
Do it.
And I'm gonna make their lives hell.
Now we're just totally off the clock now. As we always point out, but some added bonus unscripted conversation.
That's how we do. That's how we do. All right, that's it. I'm out of here. I love you very much.
When I ran for the school board last time, my running mate talked about how volunteering was a privilege that she was inaccessible to her. So as a single mom working 3 jobs, being on committees and volunteering on things was inaccessible to her. So I think we need to remember that as we're identifying candidates who might not have those volunteer hours or things in their CVs to find other ways of supporting them.
It's wild because the only reason that I can do it is because I am a musician and we're not working until, that's the only reason. If I was on the road, if I was working my regular job, I'm gone. I'm on the road 200 days of the year.
Yeah.
Like there's no way for me to participate. So I really, a lot of people are only able to participate now because the world has fallen out from underneath them.
True.
That's why I'm here. I've just chosen to put it in a good direction.
Great. So everyone head on over to the other Zoom link and have your little chit chat with everybody before we all go to bed and get a good rest. So we really raise my hands in appreciation to the organizers. Women Transforming Cities is doing incredible work and we're working so hard to drive meaningful change in all of our communities, and deep respect to all the panelists tonight. This was a lot of fun. You're all so energetic and brave and bold and incredibly gifted at what you do and passionate. Yes, I loved it. Today was a lot of fun. I needed that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rhiannon. You're so gifted in bringing it all together, making us feel so supported, and like I was really nervous, but all of you really helped me to just say what I wanted to. So thank you so much. My gratitude, truly. So we go back to that other link, I guess.